Rick Snyder was born in Battle Creek, Michigan, grew up with his parents in a 900-square-foot home on North 22nd Street. He spent summer days, just like today, working at a local general store and fishing and water skiing on Gun Lake. After he graduated from Battle Creek Lakeview High School, he went to the University of Michigan, and after a successful career with Coopers & Lybrand, he guided the growth of Gateway till it became a Fortune 500 company with over 10,000 employees. Then he chose to return to Michigan, focus his efforts on building new businesses from the ground up. How about this? An unprecedented $200 million he raised in venture capital funds to invest in startup businesses, including Health Media Incorporated. He is now a candidate for governor on the Republican side. The primary is just over a month away, and we welcome Republican candidate for governor, Rick Snyder. Thanks for coming.
It's great to be with you, and it's fabulous. I'm a small business person, so this is like coming home.
I left out maybe your one qualifying statement, one tough nerd.
Yeah, it's a great term. It's worked really well, and the fun part is people look behind it and see hardworking, thoughtful problem solving, and that's what we got to do in the state. We're going to go solve some problems.
Let me ask you just a couple questions before we turn you over to the panel here. There's some talk that Sarah Palin is thinking about maybe coming into Michigan and endorsing one of the Republican candidates. Have you had any conversation with the maverick Sarah Palin, the former vice presidential candidate?
Actually, I've never met or talked to her.
Really?
Yeah.
You wouldn't mind her endorsement, though, would you?
Well, it's great to have endorsements from people, but it's been an interesting story on my endorsement track record right here. We've got some groups that don't think I'm the best candidate just because I'm not a special interest kind of guy. So I'm standing up for all the people, and that's caused a few ruffles around Lansing.
Yeah, you're a non-traditional candidate, to be sure, right?
Absolutely. Well, the way I view it is if our government was working well, our political system was working well, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. It's really a case of we've got a broken system, and I think it's time for someone from the receiving end to show up in Lansing with some common sense, real-world solutions and excite a team to go do that.
You are with this panel today. These are all small business people that are going to be asking you questions, and in the coffee house next door, all listening closely, because their livelihoods and the people who work for them depend on the decisions, in many cases, that are made down the street here at the Capitol. So I thought, if you want to just sort of introduce yourself. They all saw you, by the way, last week at the SBAM event at the Kellogg Center. We're all very impressed, as I understand. You got a lot of applause that day and did very well. Why don't you introduce yourself to them as if you were knocking on their door, meeting them on the street, and then we'll just have Q&A the rest of the way.
Well, I appreciate that, Michael Patrick. In the big picture, the way I look at it is we've got a situation now where we're in economic disaster in the state. We've got a broken government. We've got career politicians that are talking about fixing Michigan. Fixing Michigan is not good enough. It is time to fundamentally reinvent our state. And to do that, I'm using a framework that you as small business people use to start your businesses. You all had a vision. You had a vision of what you could accomplish for the future. And I have a vision for Michigan. It's about starting a new era, the era of innovation. You had a plan. You took that vision and said, what's my business plan now? How am I going to make this happen? What are the steps I need to take? Well, I put together a 10-point plan. And it starts with the need for more and better jobs in our state, tax reform, regulatory reform, things to make you more successful. And the third thing you had to do is you had to take action. And that was the toughest part in many ways. Many people have a vision. Many people have a plan. But to go be a small business person, to start an enterprise, it's a bold move. And you really made something happen. And that's the attitude I'm bringing to this. And that's what I've done my entire career. This would be probably my fourth career transition. And I've made those bold moves before. And it's time to step up and do that. Because too long, we felt beaten up in the state. Quite often when I talk to people, they'll talk about the things I'm covering as being too tough to do, about a new era, about making bureaucracy go away. And you can see people have their heads down too much. They'll say, you can't do that. Well, as you know, people probably told you that when you wanted to start your business. If you would have listened, you wouldn't be sitting here today. Just because something's tough doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. In this case, it's why we have to do it. So I'm asking people to join me. This is not about me. This is about we. It's about us standing together as Michiganders, not as divided people, but as a united people to say, let's reinvent Michigan today. Let's be a great state.
Thank you very much. Our initial panel, Kim LaForette from Coldwell Banker, Hubble Briarwood, Cheryl Freeborough from Freeborough Automotive, Bob Hedlund from Hedlund Plumbing, and Peggy and Gary Doty from Doty Mechanical with their questions. And we will also invite everyone in the coffee house, the small business people there. If you have questions, just come on up, get cozy with us here. But let's turn it over now to our panel and candidate, Rick Snyder.
Well, I have a question here, and following up on what you had said just a moment ago. Since you have never been in the political machine, how are you going to stay out of it if you're elected?
Yeah, how will I stay out of it? Well, I view it as when you start a business or you do an operation, my view is you don't try to break the rules. You try to modify the rules to be an appropriate situation. And this is a case where there's a broken culture, and we can build on that. It's not to say everything's a disaster. I mean, fundamentally, we've got a great government structure. Democracy is wonderful.
I agree.
The question is, how do we take that and channel it into something most productive? And one of the easiest illustrations I'll tell you is if you look at the history, and bureaucracy goes back to the late 1800s of how we operate our government. It hasn't changed in hundreds of years. What else in our life hasn't changed in 100-some years? And it's way too focused on just doing activities. Basically, they take in tax dollars, they go spend them on a whole bunch of activities. If you tried to run your business that way, you wouldn't have stayed in business very long.
Probably not.
The only way you succeeded is because you set real goals, objectives, measures, and outcomes. And when the Lansing people say, I'm a business person and I don't get how Lansing operates, it's like, well, what's wrong with having goals, measures, outcomes, and objectives? That's how the private sector successfully works. So my goal is, in many respects, is let's not throw everything out, but let's take an overlay of what really works in the private sector. We know it works really well. We know government's broken. Let's take those learnings and move them and put them in place here and have a better overall system. And in terms of your question about personally, if I looked at it, I'm not taking this job for credit or any other reason other than I love Michigan. I've had a blast starting companies. As you know, it's hard work, but it's extremely rewarding. I could continue to create companies. But when you look at it, what's the highest and best use of how I think I can help millions of people? A few more companies would be great, but this is an opportunity to really make a difference.
You know, Cheryl Freero here, and I have a question concerning that. I think that your ideas are refreshing and great, and I see as a business owner, if I were in your spot, I would look at my biggest challenge, which is today, even in my business, the people that work with me. And you're going to have those challenges of the people that work with you, the people that can vote against what you want. How do you deal with that, and how do you expect to be dealing with that? As a business owner, you have a lot of control. You may not have as much control when you get into this office. And how do you think you can deal with that?
Sure, there are two different categories, but I'll take one that comes up more often, because there's the issue of managing state government, and then there's the legislative issue. Right. And the legislative issue is the one that tends to come up more often, but don't underestimate, I'm the only candidate that's got skills as a chief executive to run the managerial piece of the government, the 50-some thousand employees and the multi-billion-dollar budget. On the legislative side, when you look at it, I need to partner with them. But if you look at where they're at today, again, that's broken. Are they really getting anything done? They really haven't accomplished anything. And they're actually good people on an individual basis. So there's a broken culture. And a lot of it is you've got 110 and 38. If you added them together, you got 148 people. If you don't have any vision or plan or real leadership, are 148 people going to get anything done? No. So the first thing that we need to do is to show some leadership here. And
we'll find out the rest of it as soon as we come back. Republican candidate Rick Snyder, that's step one. What comes after that? Find out as soon as we come back.